It's interesting that they're coming out with this statement and that nothing is being done to stop these clashes. I imagine that the government is trying to benefit from this violence.
Well, that would be the impression. That it would in many ways be a conclusion that you could deduce. If we think about the kind of slogans that the government has been using, President Mubarak, when he spoke to the nation late on Tuesday, he presented himself as a force of stability. He used his speech to underline the anarchy, the chaos, the security mayhem that had unfolded in the streets ever since last Friday and ever since the police force withdrew from the streets. The spectre of anarchy has been haunting people in Egypt. Even as the anti-government demonstrations were reaching a height on Tuesday, we already heard in the streets around people asking, why are we doing this? We're bringing Egypt to its knees. We have created all this violence. One of the main slogans that I saw at the pro-government demonstration earlier was 30 years of stability, 9 days of anarchy. President Mubarak's strong card is that of stability, law and order. What we're seeing right now, we're hearing the shots again. The government incidentally denied that any shots were being fired. Well, I'm sorry, we can all hear them with our own ears. Again and again, shots are being fired. They appear to be warning shots.
Who's firing those warning shots, Jackie? Can you tell at all who's firing those warning shots?
It appears to be the military who are firing the warning shots because the military have essentially taken over the compound of the Egyptian Museum. They have been using this as a base, they've been using it as a lookout point, and they're also using it now. It would appear that the warning shots have been fired from the Egyptian Museum, which is now an army base rather than a museum. And the government, as I said, really stands Mubarak, who has sold himself as a force for stability, a force for order. He appears to be the person who would immediately stand to benefit and that he can say, look, you need me to resolve this situation. The other person that we've been hearing from is Mohammed al-Baradei, one of the opposition leaders, calling on the army to put an end to these clashes, saying that these are criminal actions carried out by a criminal leadership. But he's had a message for the opposition as well. He has called on the opposition to hold the square, despite the violence, despite the bloodshed that we've seen around the square. He's calling on those people in the square to hold the square until Friday. Last Friday, the opposition named the Day of Rage. The opposition says that this Friday will be the day of departure. This is the deadline. This is the ultimatum that people are giving. And it seems to be an ultimatum which is being repeated by foreign leaders.
Okay, Jackie, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. As night falls in Egypt, there is still chaos on the streets of Cairo, where for the last 4 hours now, almost 4 hours, pro and anti-government supporters have been clashing with the army, just standing by and watching. Mubarak supporters have reportedly been dropping concrete blocks on opposition protesters, and we've seen this with our own eyes. Supporters of the regime standing on top of buildings, pulling whatever they can, whether it's satellite dishes, to throw onto the crowds below them. We've got a correspondent on the line who's witnessing all of this firsthand. He was with the pro-Mubarak supporters earlier. Tell me what's been happening where you are.
Well, Polly, I've just withdrawn slightly from what essentially is the battlefield of Tahrir or Liberation Square, and I went and I approached some of the soldiers who are in the armored personnel carriers and tanks, and I asked them, are you not going to intervene? As you can see, there is unprecedented violence here. And the simple answer from these soldiers was, we have no orders, we're not going to do anything. Obviously, an order can come any minute, or it could not at all. But as it stands now, the soldiers who are in their tanks, who are in their armored personnel carriers, have no intention whatsoever of bringing an end to this violence. And just to pick up on what my colleague Jackie was talking about, it is very important for us to know that whilst the protesters, the anti-government protesters over the past week have brought Cairo's commercial center to a standstill, there were no violent scenes since last Friday. Since last Friday, when the protesters took over Tahrir Square and remained in the square, the demonstrations have been very peaceful. It is only today when these hundreds, if not a few thousand of the pro-Mubarak protesters came that we saw some sort of clashes taking place.
The demonstrations, yes, the demonstrations you say have been largely peaceful, and that is correct. But we did see clashes between the anti-government demonstrators and security forces on Friday and Saturday, and that left at least 150 dead, a bit more according to the UN, actually 300 according to the UN. This is the first time, and you're right to point that out, that we're seeing clashes between pro and anti-government supporters. And it's certainly interesting that in a week of demonstrations, it's really the first time that we've seen the pro-Mubarak supporters take to the streets today.
Indeed, and I posed that question to some of the pro-Mubarak supporters, asking them how come it took you a week to turn to the streets. And the answer I got was, well, yesterday we weren't happy seeing our leader broken on screen. Essentially, many felt that Mubarak's position, and he has been seen as a man who is ruled by an iron fist, a strong, powerful military commander. Many viewed that he appeared in a position of weakness on television, and the understanding of patriotism here in Egypt is very complex. It is not as simple as in possibly other countries. Here in Egyptian, there is a very famous Egyptian saying which says, "I will curse my son, but I dislike anyone who says amen," which essentially sums up the Egyptian mentality, that they have no problem having issue or taking issue with their own people, but the moment it is seen to the outside world that there is some sort of disunity or there is some sort of opposition to one of their own, that is when things could become a bit more complex. Nevertheless, it is important to note throughout this week of unprecedented protests that the numbers, the sheer numbers who have come not only in Cairo but in Alexandria, in Suez, in Mansoura and Mahalla and across Egypt of people calling for the end of Mubarak are far greater in number and in background than those who have come in support of him today.
Indeed, and I was just going to ask you, who exactly is organizing these pro-Mubarak supports, these pro-Mubarak demonstrations? We heard earlier from one of our correspondents who said that in one of the convoys was being led by security forces. So one wonders really who is behind these pro-Mubarak demonstrations.
Indeed, I was with the pro-Mubarak demonstration as it came to in front of the national state-owned television station, and the front of that protest or that march was being led by a pickup truck which had on it 5 uniformed police officers, and they were chanting with the crowd pro-Mubarak slogans. Now, whether they were wearing uniforms and off-duty or whether they were on duty, that's difficult for me to confirm, but obviously there was a security presence with those pro-government people. Having said that, we have to also remind our viewers that the building of the National Democratic Party, Mubarak's party, is essentially ashes right now. There is no clear party here on the ground, so there is no actual organization that one can turn to. There hasn't been a statement issued out by the NDP calling for people to come out and support. Neither did Mubarak himself ask people to come out to support, at least not publicly. So just as the opposition to Mubarak has come out organically, those who have come onto the streets